What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 17. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in last week. Last week's episode did pretty good in its first week compared to my prior episodes, so I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Lots of fun topics we talked about, especially that state of play that Sony dropped last week, or, well, 2 weeks ago, I guess, from the time you're probably listening to this episode. And I'm actually recording a little earlier this week. I'm recording on Thursday, actually the Thursday that the Summer's Game Fest happened. It actually happened earlier this morning. It's Thursday afternoon. And my gosh, I haven't caught up with all the trailers. And the next episode after this one that you hear, we're going to dive into, obviously, the Xbox Showcase. That's going to be the big one that we're going to dive into. But some of these other announcements, I think Devolver Digital just did a showcase. Ubisoft announced a showcase. It's basically E3 is still here because everyone just wants to blow their load at this time and try to steal the spotlight. But it's just pure chaos in the industry. But as a consumer, as a fan, there's lots to be excited about, and lots of cool things coming your way. So good stuff there, and lots to look forward to and discuss on the upcoming show. But I'm recording earlier for this episode because I'm actually heading out of town this weekend, and I won't get a chance to record like I normally do. So I'm trying to get it in early so we don't miss an episode. And I got two main topics I kind of want to talk about this week. One slightly news item related, and the other is just kind of for fun. So we'll dive into that here momentarily. But it's crazy out there, and there's already been some big announcements, like The Last of Us remake. It's real, but I'll hold all my thoughts until we get to next week's episode when I can actually sift through the plethora of information out there and talk. We'll talk about it in detail. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, for those of you that are new to the podcast or the uninitiated, the best way to support the show is to leave a comment if you're listening in on YouTube. That's always helps out with the algorithms. Or leave a rating on the podcast platform. Leave us a nice rating. Helps us get into the mix. Lets people see and find the show, which would be awesome. So very much appreciate that. Also, head on over to Locals. That's where I'm trying to cultivate a community. I want my listeners to get over there so we can have a community over there and start to do some interesting things down the road once we get some folks over there. So that's the Gamecite Chronicles.locals.com. It's a really cool platform. There's lots of other creators on there as well. So I encourage you to check it out. And lastly, or additionally on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. I also have been this last week I really haven't done much, but I've been dabbling in the YouTube Shorts, which have been fun little videos to make and kind of support the podcast. So if you're interested in checking those out, head on over to youtube.com/Gamecite and subscribe there. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And remember, new episodes of the show go up each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, as I mentioned, this week's show, I wanted to do something fun and kind of get away from the news since I'm recording a little bit earlier, though, and the news is about to blow their load this weekend when I'm out of town. So I want to talk about my top 10 underrated games from last gen. I put together a list. I want to share that with you guys, walk through those games because I think it's always fun to do those types of things. And there's also one other thing I wanted to cover that's kind of news related. And that's this article that's kind of been floating about on Twitter about game prices in PlayStation, and how it's positioned as Sony is forcing higher game prices. So I want to get into that a little bit. But before we do that, let's get into the games that we've been playing. Remember, write into the show. Let me know what games you've been playing so I can incorporate those into the show. I love seeing what other people are playing because it's not always the new releases. Sometimes they're old school games, which is awesome. And it's just nice to see what everyone kind of dives into because I'm only one person. I only play so many games. What are you playing out there? So this week, while I'll be candid, I haven't had a ton of time to play video games, but I have played a little bit, and that's Kingdoms of Amalur. I've been continuing that, and I've done some additional story quests. Hopefully you can't hear that in the background. My wife just opened our garage, but So I apologize if you're getting some background noise. That's, yeah. Anyways, perks of recording. So I've been doing some more story quests on Kingdom of Amalur. I mentioned last week I was doing one of the faction quest lines. I think it's the House of Sorrows, and I finished that. That was actually a pretty cool quest line. I think all the faction quest lines have been great. They've been really interesting and worthwhile. So I finished that, did a couple additional story missions. I think I only have 2 story missions left until I see the end of the main story, the main quest line. So I'm kind of just, my plan is just to plow through that so I can kind of just retire this game. Maybe I'll come back at a later date, play the 2 DLCs that came with the original game's launch and the Fate Weaver DLC that was recently launched, I think late last year, if I recall, which is crazy to think that here we are like 9 years later, there was a DLC that dropped, which is awesome. That's so cool. So yeah, I'm hoping to finish up that game in this next week, time permitting. It's been just really busy, with personal things, and I'm sure y'all understand that. Don't get to game as much as I like to sometimes, and that's just the fact of life. But once I'm done with that game, I've kind of been thinking about, what do I want to play next? Like what's on the list? Obviously, I can return to Elden Ring. And there's a high probability of that. Maybe I'll take down a couple more bosses, get refamiliarized with myself in that game. But I kind of want to play, finally, Xenoblade Chronicles. The 3rd one's coming up. But I know that's such a huge time commitment. I also want to play Resident Evil 4 with the remake announcement from that State of Play officially. It's kind of gotten me wanting to play the original, which I've never played. So I'm kind of looking at that one. I still want to play Salt and Sacrifice. That came out I think early May. So it's been out for a bit, about a month or so. So I've been wanting to play that. And then one of my favorite video games, he's not really a journalist, but a podcaster, if you will, because it's the only other podcast I listen to. It's Colin Moriarty. And he just dropped a new game from his studio called Super Perils of Baking, which looks just like an old school Super Nintendo platformer. And not only do I want to support him, but that looks like a fun game as well. So maybe I'll check that out. Or something that I've been thinking about playing for a while is that Final Fantasy VII Remake DLC, that Yuffie DLC. That's also been on my radar. So there's just so many games that I just want to jump into that sometimes I get overwhelmed at my choices, which, I should be thankful for. I'm in a position to where I have so many choices, but man, I don't know what to play. So if you have any recommendations out of that list I gave you, let me know. So now let's get into this news item that I wanted to cover. And it all sparked with this tweet that I saw on Twitter. Of course, just Twitter's just such a lovely place to congregate, if you will, and peruse. And it has to do with actually the studio behind Salt and Sanctuary, as well as Salt and Sacrifice, Ska Studios. And they had a price mishap. So I came across the tweet that had a linked article about that topic. And I want to read this tweet because I think it's incredibly misleading. And once we actually kind of get into what the article actually says, I think you'll see that. So this person on Twitter says, and I quote, Sony demands developer changes price on other platforms to match its own. And then in parentheses, he puts, quote, arrogant Sony is back. They want you to pay $70 for games, even if you don't own a PlayStation. End quote. And so I really feel like this, like when you actually read the article, this is incredibly misleading. And I think it's just so clickbaity because that's not what it's about. And it's clear that this person is doing it for clout. I mean, it's literally just a spark. Like so many people do this on Twitter where they say something, they have a quote unquote hot take just to get a bunch of traction on their account and followers and responses and all this stuff. And I really feel like this fits that mold. But I thought that outside of the article, I also thought that this sparks an interesting conversation about video game prices. And as I was reading through the responses, like the comments to this tweet, no one was really taking the angle that I want to take once we dive into that, and it really shocked me. So I do want to dive into the topic of video game prices and whether or not $70 is too high, and kind of that sentiment around it, I guess. But back to the article about Scott Studios and Salt and Sacrifice. So the article was originally from Gamecite. That's the one he quoted, but they used an article from Push Square, who I often reference on this show. I think they do a lot of great work over there. And it was originally reported by, let me pull it up if I still have it. I don't. It was originally reported by, Tech Raptor. I think they were the ones that broke the story and everyone else kind of picked it up. But to sum it up, here's kind of what happened. So when Salt and Sacrifice came out, the price was significantly increased in various countries on the Epic Game Store. And this was intended to have parity across all regions in terms of having them be the same price. Now, to be clear, this is a PlayStation console exclusive, but it also came out on PC, so keep that in mind. And some of the changes, so here in the US, it was $20, but elsewhere in the UK, it got lowered down to decreased over there, but in Brazil, it increased over to like $104. And I know it's not dollars, but whatever their currency is, $104.90. Turkey was increased to $153, whatever their currency. So you just kind of saw these wacky prices kind of all over the board instead of having, I guess, regional pricing. And that's one of the things that Push Square pointed out. And they said that they pointed out that it's understandable that the studio entered in a deal with Sony, but that Sony should offer some more flexibility on the PS Store in kind of having regional pricing. And I think that's a fair point. So then Scott Studios came out and clarified. And they said, I quote from their statement, storefront pricing was adjusted in various regions ahead of the game's global PC launch at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. The price has not changed on any storefront or in any region following launch, nor did any platform holder demand any changes to the game's original pricing. End quote. Then they go on to say, quote, developers, Scott Studios, and Devoured Studios apologize for any confusion regarding the price correction prior to Salt and Sacrifice's launch, and as a two-person development team, remain focused on supporting the game following a successful launch, end quote. So, I think, again, I agree with the whole regional pricing thing. I do think that's absolutely valid, especially when you talk about, various currency exchange rates and all that stuff. But I can also see why Sony would want parity across all their regions on the system to try to, I guess, maximize, profit their take of game sales, which, like it or not, that's a reality of the industry, right? The Xbox does the same thing. Anything that's sold on the Xbox marketplace, they take a cut. And I think it's typically like 30%, same as Sony. So that's just me theorizing, but it kind of was a little controversial thing. I don't really know why, but again, back to the point about $70 games and Sony forcing the industry to have this $70 price tag, and how everyone seems to just be so butthurt about $70 games. And like no one wants to pay full price for $70 games. Now I know that's not entirely true, but that seems to be a general sentiment out there anytime this topic's come up. Now to coincide with this, there's also another related news story about Square Enix now charging $70 for their games on PC, starting with Forspoken, which I think comes out later this year, and Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is actually now, I think by the time you hear this, and is now available on PC. Those are $70. And so again, back this idea of $70 games and people just being so outraged by it. Why? What's the sentiment? People are so frustrated. So first of all, I want to say that I agree $70 is a significant amount of money. It's a chunk of change. It's quite a bit for a game. And certainly when you talk about price increases, from the $60 to $70, and just $70 in general for new games in the AAA space, I'll say, or first party space. That's going to kind of, for a lot of people, that's going to limit the number of games you can buy. And I understand that. And, especially in, today's economy, with all this stuff going on with inflation and the job market and stuff like that, I completely understand frustrations around the cost of goods, because it's not just video games, right? It's your groceries, your gas, etc. So I can sympathize with that level of sentiment coming from that angle. But as I mentioned before, no one on the responses to that tweet was going to kind of look at the economics of it. And which I guess really isn't too surprising when you think about it. I mean, it's Twitter, and it's full of, uneducated people or people just saying shit for clout, trying to get clicks and all of that stuff. Like, I shouldn't be surprised, but it did kind of take me back that, like, no one wants to take this angle or kind of look at things from this lens. So that's what I want to do. So here's the truth about video game prices. And I'll be honest, I get a lot of this information from, I mentioned him earlier, Colin Moriarty, who I listen to his podcast, and it's a fact because he backs it up with numbers. So the fact is that games have never been cheaper or more accessible than they are today. So let's start with cheaper. Games have never been cheaper than they are today. So in researching this kind of topic for the show around video game prices, I actually came across an IGN article from 2013 titled "The Real Cost of Gaming: Inflation, Time, and Purchasing Power." And I want to read the first two paragraphs here. So here we go, and I'm quoting the article here. Quote, "Inflation is a fact of economic life. Quite simply, costs of products and services fluctuate and typically increase over time, increasing the money needed to purchase those products and services. That means that $1 today is worth a lot less than $1, say, 2 decades ago. Indeed, $1 in 1912 has the purchasing power of $23 today. Mercifully, there's a flip side to this equation. Though inflation is inherently destructive to the value of money, decreasing purchasing power can be counteracted by how much similar products cost over a period of time. This is especially true when it comes to video game consoles and handhelds, or electronics generally, which have become more affordable over time when even something seems to be more expensive." And I think that's great information. Now, funny enough, and I didn't realize this until I looked at the author of that article. It's by none other. It was written by Colin Moriarty when he worked at IGN. So kind of funny. He seems to be the person pioneering this angle and lens with economic facts and the reality of life and money. So I think that's funny. Now this next paragraph, I do want to read it as well because it kind of gives some examples about the costs of games then versus now. And again, I say now, this is 2013, so 9 years ago. Really, that means it's even worse, especially with the inflation we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, especially here in the US. And I know that's happening all over the world, quite frankly, because our governments just can't stop spending money and printing money. But I digress there. So it continues, and I quote, "I've made the argument over the last few years that games are essentially cheaper than they've ever been. An NES game in 1990 cost on average about $50. That's $89 in 2013 money. Your $70 N64 cartridges in 1998 would require the equivalent of $100 today. Heck, the $50 PlayStation 2 game you bought in 2005 is worth $60, the exact price of a typical retail game in 2013. This isn't to say that salaries or hourly pay haven't kept up with inflation and the cost of living. It decidedly hasn't. But it is to say that dollar to dollar over the last 35 years, gaming hardware and software is generally cheaper than ever. Hardware in particular is where the difference is actually, I'm not going to read that part. I'll end it there, end quote, because we're talking about games. And so essentially, games cost more back then relative to today when you take into account of inflation. I mean, that's really what he's saying to sum it up. And as I mentioned, this is from 2013, so you add 9 more years of inflation and the egregious inflation we've seen today. That's even more true because prices are still 60 to 70, now $70. $70 still didn't even cut it. That's only what, 7? That's a very small percentage. I'm not going to do the math in my head right now. Not while I'm recording. And so I think if you take that fact and you couple that with the amount of money it takes to make games, I think it starts to paint a picture on why things are the way they are. So I was looking at the list of the top gaming budgets from Wikipedia. And again, I know I understand we're looking at the top end, but I think this is also represented a good representation of the AAA space. And of those top 10 games, which I'll read a few examples of those. Let me pull it up. You have, let's see, Cyberpunk 2077, which has a total cost with 2021 inflation, $331 million. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, inflation in 2021 be $316 million. Final Fantasy 7, approximately $135 to $245 million. Halo 2, $230 million. Destiny, $160 million. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, $119 to $146 million, and so on. And so you have that. And then I found another article from guru.com, which stated that an average AAA game costs approximately $250 million, while an indie game is anywhere from $50,000 to $700,000. So if we just take the averages of those top 10 games that I was talking about, that's $175 million. That means you'd have to sell approximately 2.9 million copies of that game at a $60 price point just to recoup your costs. This isn't profit. That's just to get your costs back. Whereas if it's $70, it's $2.5 million. And again, that's just to recoup your costs, to remain flat. There's no profit. And that's quite a few copies of games. Now, in some of the bigger, obviously, like the likes of, when you talk about Call of Duties, I mean, they're selling tens of millions. That's not super hard. But when you talk about a game like, let's say, Outriders, right? I think that game sold, I think, a couple million, but hasn't, according to Square Enix, hasn't turned a profit. I mean, that's maybe part of it, right? So just I go over this just to kind of provide some context, because I think it's important to understand and try to look at it from this angle, from a business angle. So my point being is that games are expensive to make, and we've had the $60 price tag for so long that hasn't kept up with inflation, especially today, and doesn't account for the game development costs rising. I think there was an article, I want to say like 2 or so years ago, from, I think it was Sean Layden, who's the former president of PlayStation or Sony. Basically, he was the former head of PlayStation, not what it was. And he talked about that, you get these, 60, 80, 100 hour games that take 5+ years to make, and they're super expensive. And because these games take so long to make, it's hard to kind of keep that financial cycle going. And so his recommendation was to say, I would rather see, 10 to 12 hour games, smaller size games made in 2 to 3 years, because that's an easier, I think, cycle to manage financially. I would like that anyways, because some of these, it's just a personal preference of mine. I think some of these games are super bloated. And with my time, my gaming time limited as it is, I like smaller size games. But that's nor here nor there. Nor here. That's not here. That's not here nor there. Something like that. So now about the accessibility portion, because I mentioned games are more affordable and accessible today. So accessibility is big. And I'm not talking about accessibility when we talk about people with disabilities and things like that. I'm talking about being able to play a plethora of games. So we see this with the rise of subscription services like Xbox Gold, PlayStation Plus, obviously Nintendo Online, and of course Game Pass. We have access to so many games for very little entry fee. For as little as $1 for Game Pass. If you're a new subscriber to Game Pass, you can sign up for $1 and you get access to that 100+ game library. $1. And with Xbox Gold and PlayStation Plus, you get 2+ free games every month. I mean, that could just fill up your entire library. You do that for 1 year, which is what, $60 for an annual subscription to those, and you've got 24 games at least. Now, the quality of those games will certainly vary, but that's a lot of games. So there's value there. Now, I think about how good kids have it today. Like if I was, 10 to 15 years old, like how good do you have it, man? Like seriously. And I maybe I sound a little old timer or I'm showing my age a little bit, but like seriously, there's so many games that you have access to for very little money. And this doesn't even include all of the free-to-play titles. The likes of Apex Legends, Fortnite, Destiny, the base game of Destiny, all that stuff. So free-to-play. There's so many things you can just jump into without hurting your wallet at all. It's crazy. And this also doesn't account for the plethora of smaller titles, like indie titles, that are available at the $10 to $30 price tag. And all the sales that we see on a weekly basis on really all console platforms, Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation. Every week they have different games that go on sale, and some of them are stupid cheap. So I just asked the question, like, what are people expecting here? Are folks just expecting to be given free shit all the time? Or like pay nothing or little to nothing for their entertainment? That's not how this works. I mean, I go back to the old saying, like, nothing in this world is free. Everything costs something. And if you put into context that your money, when you buy a game, goes to the service, let's use PlayStation. So 30% of that is going to go to the service and the rest goes to the developer. That's then feeding those families of those the developers. And so this just trickle down effects. Like if you're not paying them money, then they're I guess it's trickle down economics is what it comes down to. But I just don't understand. I guess it genuinely boggles my mind. And I guess maybe some of it's entitlement from the younger generations, like I guess my generation and younger. Because a lot of them do have to they walk around with this sense of entitlement. But I also think that part of this is the effect of Game Pass and these subscription services on the perception of game value. Because we have so much access through subscriptions to these games that I think and we've had this for years now. Even Game Pass, I think that launched in 2017? We've had this for 5 years. So we've had this for years. And I think it slowly started to affect the way people perceive the value of a video game, the dollar value of a video game. Because you get access to a library of games at $10 a month. Folks don't want to pay full price for games. And candidly, why would you? If the company is saying, hey, you can either buy this game for $40 a la carte, or give me $10 and have access to it as long as you maintain subscription. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, why wouldn't you do that deal if you're generally financially savvy? I mean, it just makes sense. Why would you pay more money for the same thing? And that's what these companies want. That's what Xbox is going for. They don't care about game sales. They want you to subscribe. That's the whole idea. And that's why the prices are positioned a certain way. So if you think about it, it's almost as if we're being conditioned not to buy games, which I think is a shame. I personally enjoy buying and owning physical games. I like having a la carte options. And the future freaks me out. Great song, by the way. But I also think this will have drastic effects on the industry. And I've talked about this. I've touched on it a little bit in previous episodes. But the short version is, if no one's buying games, and the only budget, the monetary budget to to make video games comes from this pool of subscriptions, really from the platform holders, I'm not sure if there's enough money to go around. And that's what's going to hurt the smaller guys. That's what I'm concerned about. Because obviously the first parties will get taken care of from that pool first. I mean, first party. It's almost in the name, literally. And then as that money starts to kind of dwindle, as you kind of go outside of first party with the bigger studios or bigger AAA games, like those smaller guys, I don't think they're going to get a piece of that pie. I don't know if there's enough pie to go around for everyone, if everyone's drinking out of the same pool. So I went on a big, long rant that sparked from this tweet. But long story short, if you look at the economic reality and the cost of making games, $70 really is still too cheap for a video game. And with that, video games have never been more cheaper and accessible than they are today. So if anything, just take that away. And I'm sure you'll let me know what you think, but I think this is an interesting perspective to look at and try to put yourselves in the developer or not the developer shoes or the platform holder shoes, the business. Look at the business side. Think about the business side. Think about the economic reality. This is important because it has to do with what we love to consume. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into the main topic I wanted to touch on today, which is my top 10 underrated games from last gen. So I put together this list, as I mentioned, and this list consists of 10 games that I'm kind of deeming is underrated from the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 generations. Now, when I say underrated, I mean maybe from a score-wise on a couple of these, but also kind of forgotten to time, or there's a game that, or maybe it's a game just that didn't get the attention I think it deserves. So that's how I kind of put together this list. And these are games that all of them I really enjoyed and mostly just want to share with you guys, if you haven't played it, to check them out. Now, this list is in no particular order, but the first game on the list is Valkyria Chronicles, particularly the remastered version. Now, this game was originally released on PS3 in 2008, but I played the PS4 version, which was remastered, came out in 2016. Now, the remastered version has a Metacritic score of 84 and a user score of 8.2. And just in case you were curious, how long does it take to beat this game? Which, if you've never been to this website, howlongtobeat.com, I highly recommend it. If you have time crunches or a lack of time to play games and you're thinking about what game do I want to play next, use that website because it kind of gives you an idea of how long games are based on people's input on how long it took them to beat the games. And plus or minus a few hours, but I would say it's fairly accurate for the most part, depending on how you play. So Valkyria Chronicles is approximately 36 hours long. So I've talked about this game a little bit before, but I love this game. And I genuinely think it's probably definitely in my top 10 games of all time. It's just, I just fell in love with this game. And it's funny because this is a game that I really particularly wouldn't enjoy with a strategy game. I've never really been big on strategy role-playing games. But with this one, I think one of the things that interested me most about this game was that, yeah, you have, your strategy elements of it and you're kind of moving players and kind of doing things very tactfully. But instead of like on a grid-based system, which most, strategy games are, you choose your character and then you actually go down into this third-person perspective and then you run around almost like it's this third-person action game. And then when you want to actually shoot someone or aim, you have to aim and you can kind of choose either weak spots or different spots to aim for and attack. And that's really what drew me in. I was like, this looks awesome. I love this idea. And I think it works out really, really well. Now, one of the things I love about this game is it's kind of alternate World War II history. Now, it's not literal alternate history, but it's basically this world's version of a World War II and kind of what's going on. and it's fascinating. I love it. I love that, the idea of that, and I think it's played out really well. And I also think you can tell really awesome stories with it, and this game does. It has a fantastic story. And not only do you have kind of this very wartime story, but there's also some kind of mystical elements in the game, with some powers and stuff like that. And that's actually one of the things that I feel like is underrepresented or kind of undertold in this game and the franchise from the other game that I've played of it, Valkyria Chronicles 4. So I would love for them to make another game and explore that aspect a little bit more, but I don't know if we'll ever get that, but it's fantastic. And the last thing I'll say about this game that I really, really like about it is its art style and the art direction. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And it's really unique too, because what it is it's essentially a watercolor painting in how it's put together. And you can literally see that because the edges of the screen are white because it's on white paper, and then everything else is filled in with this beautiful watercolor artwork. And it looks awesome. It runs really well on the PS4, and I think it's a fantastic game. So if you are any remotely interested in strategy games, I highly recommend you check this out. It has a great story and the awesome characters that develop and grow, and the character interactions, you get to kind of explore and learn more about them, and it's very well done. I think it's such a charming and endearing game that's awesome and fun to play. Now, this next game, I may get a little flack for, but I don't care. And that is The Order 1886, which was made by Ready at Dawn. Now, this game originally came out back in November 2015. It has a Metacritic score of 63, a user score of 6.8, so not that great. Definitely lower than you'd like, but according to howlongtobeat.com, it takes about 8.5 hours to beat. And this is an interesting game. I enjoyed my time with this game, but I want to preface and start this out by saying I understand this game's criticisms when it came out. I think people thought it was too short, and I think one of the biggest factors to this game's reception was I think people were expecting something different based on how it was shown off. So maybe not intentionally misled in the marketing of this game, but kind of set up to have different expectations for what they actually got. Because you look at the trailers and kind of what was shown off, I mean, everyone, myself included, was saying this is the Gears of War on PlayStation. That's what this is. And that's not what we got. There are elements of that. I mean, there are it is a third-person cover shooter style game. There are those sections in that game, but there's a lot of narrative and quick-time events, story elements in this game that were a lot heavier than I think people enjoyed. And the way, I was kind of thinking about this, and I think the way I would put it in position this game is that if you like narrative, story-driven games, in maybe some won't agree with me, but in the veins of like Until Dawn, or the Dark Picture Anthology series, Life is Strange, those style of almost interactive narrative games, then I think you should try this out. Because there are sections of the game that are like that, to where you're kind of just walking around an area, maybe kind of exploring it. But then there's also sections where you're running and gunning, third-person shooter. And, with the QuickTime events and all of that stuff, that's how I would position this game. And so if you're interested in those style of games, or you enjoy those style of games, then yeah, check out The Order 1886. Now, as I mentioned before, I enjoyed my time with this game. I think I streamed a little bit of it when it came out, because I was streaming at the time. And I think one of the things, like a couple of things that I liked about it is, first of all, it's a beautiful looking game. Like when this game came out, it was like the best looking game on console, certainly on PlayStation at the time. I don't know how well it holds up today. I haven't tried it out or anything, but I imagine it still holds up pretty well today, because they were pretty phenomenal graphics, and that was one of the big selling features of the game. I thought gameplay was fine. I don't know. the biggest fan of QuickTime events, but I thought they were fine in this game. Certainly added some suspenseful moments in the game. But I enjoyed the kind of the shooting and some of the weapons that you get in the game are really cool. And I really enjoyed this alternate history of the game. This kind of, you're in 18th century, I think London or something like that. But your technology is a little bit more advanced. So you have these really awesome weapons. Tesla is like one of your main dudes, making your, gadgetry and stuff like that. And then you're fighting these werewolves. It's awesome. The premise is really, really awesome. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. It was very appealing. Very appealing. Now, as I mentioned before, I know some people said the game was super short and not worth the price tag. And not to get it back into the whole price conversation, but I can understand that critique. But my thing is if you had a good time playing it like I did, then I don't care how long it is. So I think that's something to keep in mind, because I think some people said the game's only 5 hours long. You can probably rush through it in that amount of time, but if you're trying to take your time, explore a little bit, it'll take you longer than that. But it's not a long game by any stretch of the imagination. That's for sure. I think the saddest thing about this game for me is that we're not probably ever going to get a sequel, and this game ends kind of on a cliffhanger. It sets itself up for a sequel, which is unfortunate, because like I said, I liked the story, I liked where it was going, and I want to see where it goes. And I do think this game lays some really good foundation to where if you were to make a sequel, a proper sequel, and set the right expectations, that could be really, really awesome. Really, really awesome. Because I think if you build upon the third-person combat, make that more of the focus, and keep the world, keep the setting, keep the characters, and just kind of focus more on the combat and this third-person action adventure, that would be great. And obviously you're going to have your narrative elements, but you can even incorporate, instead of maybe do QuickTime events, maybe it's like a boss battle or something. And I don't know. I just think there's some good foundation here that, if built upon, could be something really special, I think. But nonetheless, I put this on the list because I know the game gets a lot of flack, like another game that I dearly love, but I didn't put on this list for one reason or another. Knack, looking at you. I love Knack. I've talked about that before, but I think this is a game that, if you're interested in those types of games, like I said, check it out. So the third game on my list is Super Lucky's Tale. And this came out originally as an Xbox exclusive, though it's came to other platforms since, in November of 2017. And then through 2019 through 2020 is when they came to all the other platforms. Has a Metacritic score of 80, user score of 6.8, and it takes about 9.5 hours long to beat. And this is a game I didn't think I was ever going to play, because I remember seeing the trailers for it advertised, this big Xbox exclusive, and I was like, this game does not look good at all. Kind of looks stupid. It's very kiddie. But funny enough, the last year I was at PAX, so this would be PAX 2017. I think it was like one of the last days, because my wife went that year with me. And we were walking the show floor around Xbox and saw the display for Super Lucky's Tale, and no one was there. There was no line. And I was like, okay, I'll try this game out. Why not? And funny enough, because they had this little vending machine type thing where you put a little coin in, twist the thing, and you get a prize. And my prize, I actually have a plushie Super Lucky. And I still have it to this day, though. I think my dog has gotten a hold of it. But either way, I played the game and I was like, that was actually pretty fun. I enjoyed my time with it. And so I ended up playing it and picking it up. And I think it's a great game. It's a return to, or an ode to, the classic 3D platformers and the mascot platformer. It's an ode to that, and I think it's very well done. It's very cute, very charming, and very much the kind of 3D platformer collectathon style of game. And it's great. I mean, I don't think there's really any other way to describe it. I genuinely think it's a fun game. If you like platformers, or you're a fan of the mascot platformer games of that era, then yeah, it's a no-brainer. Play this game. And it's available on all platforms too, so you have no excuse not to. Next up is a game called Song of the Deep. And this was made by Insomniac Games, and it was actually published by, I believe, GameStop when GameStop was trying to publish games. So you could only get it through GameStop, which is kind of weird. And this came out in July of 2016, has a Metacritic score of 69 and a user score of 7.1, and it'll take you about 9 hours to beat. And this game it's basically a Metroidvania game set in underwater. So you play as this girl who, if I recall correctly, you're looking for your dad, and you take a submarine, you're going underwater, and you just explore this underwater world in a Metroidvania style setting. And there's a little bit of combat, lots of puzzles and exploration and stuff like that. And I think it's great. I generally think it's a great game. I liked the art style. I thought it was very cute. And I just think it's one of those games where not a lot of people played it. Probably not a lot of people even heard of it. And I think it's worth trying out, worth checking out and playing. I don't know if you can get it digitally. I'll be honest. I don't know how widely available this game is. And I never hear anyone talk about it. But it's crazy because I had forgotten Insomniac Games made this. And obviously they're doing much bigger things now. But it's a great game. And so I would say if you enjoy Metroidvanias, check it out. There's nothing wrong with that. This fifth game on the list is another one by Insomniac, and that's Sunset Overdrive. And this came out in 2014, October of 2014. Has a Metacritic score of 81, user score of 7.8, and takes about 17 and a half hours to beat. And I genuinely think this is the best Xbox One exclusive out of all of them. Now, I think you can make a case for another game I've got on this list towards the bottom that might be more obvious to some folks, but genuinely, I think this is the best game on Xbox One as an exclusive. It's that good. I love this game. It's an open world game. It's a game that doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a lot of humor in it, very kind of outrageous stuff in it. And what's really fun about it is going from point A to point B, just traversing this city as you're literally just grinding around and you're fighting these monsters. And it's so much fun. And you can see the influence from Ratchet and Clank in this game almost immediately. Like, it's clear as day, especially after playing the more recent Ratchet and Clanks. It's like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. And I also love the boss battles. I think they're a ton of fun, and there's just something fluid and fun about this game. And it's great. It's genuinely great. And it's one of those games where I think a lot of people enjoyed, but just kind of went by the wayside. And it's one of those games that I think about, like, would we ever get a sequel? I think Microsoft no longer holds the IP. I think maybe they gave it back to Sony recently. So I don't know. I think it'd be really, really interesting. I would love to see a sequel for this because like I said, I think it's a really fun game. If you like the likes of Ratchet and Clank, or like, more manageable open world games that don't take itself seriously at all, because it's very goofy, very wacky, but a ton of fun to play, then play this game. It's on Game Pass, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it like brand new for like $5, which is just ridiculous. Like, you want to talk about value? That's value, my friends. But Sunset Overdrive is super awesome. It's one that I cannot recommend enough. And like I said, I genuinely think it's the best Xbox One exclusive. Now, this next one is one that maybe not very many people have heard about. It's called Hue, Hue, like the color hue. This is made by Fiddlesticks, a small indie dev. Came out in 2016 across all platforms, and has a Metacritic score of 77, user score of 7.3, and it takes about 5.5 hours to beat. And I played this game actually on my PS Vita when it came out on there. I'm pretty sure it was a PlayStation Plus game. And it's basically a puzzle platformer. And the whole kind of shtick of it is that you kind of acquire colors as you progress through the levels, and you change colors to solve puzzles and navigate the world. It's really cool, really unique in that sense. It's a small indie game. I'm pretty sure it was just given away on Xbox Live Gold here in the last month or two. So a lot of you may even have it if you regularly go get the gold games. But it's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's a short game too, so it's not going to take up a ton of your time. And so if you like puzzle platformers, definitely check this one out. Give it a go. I really think the whole color changing aspect of it was pretty clever and a lot of fun. Now at number 7 on my list is Salt and Sanctuary. And this is by Ska Studios. Their sequel, Salt and Sacrifice, which we talked about earlier in the episode, just come out. Their first game originally came out in March 2016, has a Metacritic score of 84, user score of 8.1, and takes about 20 and a half hours to beat. And the best way I can describe this game is it's 2D Dark Souls. And it's awesome. It's genuinely awesome. I love it. It has a really unique art style with the character models. But it has everything you'd love about Dark Souls if you're a Dark Souls fan. It's got those same mechanics in terms of like bonfires, souls, even though it's salt, and leveling up your character. You can customize your character, different weapons and different kind of skills. You can kind of really customize your character and play out, whether it's kind of mage and magic or more of a tank build, etc. There's a lot of variety you can do in how you build your character as you progress through the game. It has great boss battles, and it almost has a Metroidvania-esque world design and kind of how you navigate and go through the levels. And so it's one of those games where people talk about like, oh, I like Dark Souls, but what other games, should I play? And this one immediately comes to mind, Salt and Sanctuary. Another one's Death's Gambit. It's not on this list, but it's in the same vein, and I love it. I thought it was a really, really good game. And I actually met the developer at, I think it was PAX 2016. They were there. They had a booth there, and I met them, told them how much I love their game and all that stuff. So yeah, it's really, really, yeah, it would have been PAX 2016. Yep. Yeah. So if you like Dark Souls, like the Blood or the Soulsborne type style of games, I would highly encourage you to check this out. Again, their sequel, Salt and Sacrifice, supposedly not as good as the original. I haven't played it yet, but it's definitely on my list. But Salt and Sanctuary is fantastic, and I think if you like those dark elements of Dark Souls, difficulty included, you're gonna like this game. Number 8 on my list is Alien Isolation. This is made by Creative Assembly and Feral Interactive. Came out of October of 2014, so very early in Xbox One, PS3, or PS4, life cycle. Has a Metacritic score of 79, a user score of 8.3. Takes about 22 and a half hours to beat. And I have an affinity for this game because this is my very first PAX West I ever went to was in 2014. And that very first day when the show opened, we're kind of walking the show floor, figuring out which game we're going to go to first. And there was, some had some really long lines, and this one, Alien Isolation, did not. And so this is the first game I played at a gaming convention. And it was cool because you walked into this little like space station, and you're sitting in the dark. It's very dark, and you put on the headphones, and then you play through the demo. And it was a really cool experience. So I have a little affinity and bias maybe towards this game because of that. But also, I generally think it's a good game. It definitely did some things that were kind of unique at the time in terms of kind of hiding from you, like you're the prey, you're hiding from the predator. Very Outlast in that regard. And I know it introduced some unique AI, I think, with the alien, but it's great. I mean, it's from first person perspective. I'm pretty sure you play Ripley's daughter and you go to their ship, the Nostromo. I think that's how you say it. And there's still the alien there, and you gotta hide from it. And it's hunting you. It's literally hunting you as you kind of navigate through the ship. And it's terrifying. There's some scary moments in this game, and it's awesome because you have this little scanner, and you got to use it to see if the alien's by you, going through the vents and like tracking you and hunting you down. And it's very tense in that regard. And the other thing that's really, really cool about this game is that the aesthetic and the art direction they did matches to a T of the kind of futuristic, I say old futuristic tech that was in the original Alien movie from, I think that was in 1979. So we're talking like CRTV type monitors, big computers and lots of buttons and nozzles and, lights and stuff like that. All of that aesthetic from the movie is brought over into the game that makes it feel very authentic to that that franchise, and it's great. Now I will say this: I do think the game is too long, and the game is kind of really a tale of two parts. Where the first part is kind of what you expect, what I've been talking about, and what they showed off, and then the second half of the game kind of gets away from that. It gets away from its strength. And I'm not going to kind of spoil it, but it gets away from its strength and it kind of just is drawn out. It kind of overstays its welcome for this game. And I feel like it should have ended much sooner than it did because it kind of just draws on. So I will say that about the game. So keep that in mind if you decide to dive into it and haven't played it. But I still think it's a really great game. If anything, you just play kind of the beginning and the opening parts of the game, or maybe the first half of it. I think you'll have a really good time. Now, number 9 on my list is Assassin's Creed Origins. And this is a game from Ubisoft, obviously. Came out October 27th. Metacritic score of 85. User score of 7.7. Takes about 52 hours to beat. And this is a game where you might be thinking, like, why is this on the list? That was a big game. And you're right. But this is on the list because I feel like it's kind of been overshadowed now by Assassin's Creed Odyssey and then most recently Valhalla. Because this, as we talked a little bit about last week, this is the first game of this style, this new RPG style of Assassin's Creed. Is kind of reborn version of Assassin's Creed. And as I mentioned briefly last week, like this is a game that just completely encapsulated me in a way that games very few do. And it's a game where I constantly thought about it. I couldn't put it down. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the new RPG elements they introduced into it. I enjoyed exploring Egypt. I love that setting. And I like the kind of supernatural elements they put into it, as well as exploring the tombs. It was just a ton of fun. And the other thing about this game, especially compared to Odyssey and Valhalla, is it's not bloated. I think it's still a big game. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, you can I put 60 something hours into it. So you can put a lot of time into it. There's lots to do and explore, but it doesn't feel bloated when you compare it to the other games. And so I love this game. It's my favorite Assassin's Creed game, although I haven't played every single one of them, but I highly recommend this game. Absolutely. And it just came out on Game Pass, and then it just got updated to the current gen consoles at 60 FPS. They just patched it. So definitely worth your time if you're looking in for kind of an open world RPG set in Egypt. I mean, that's awesome. And the last game on my list at number 10 is Gears of War 4. And this is the one where you might be thinking, well, that's a big game as well. And this game is on the list because I feel like this game was also overshadowed by its successor, Gears of War 5, or Gears 5, I guess this is called. Now, this game came out in October 2016, has a Metacritic score of 84 and a user score of 7.0, and takes about 11.5 hours to beat. And so I mentioned it got overshadowed by Gears 5 because Gears 5, like everyone just fell in love with that game, and it was just so well received critically from a lot of folks. And while I thought Gears of War 5 was fine, but Gears of War 4 I thought was much better. And one of the things I liked about Gears of War 4 is that it was Coalition's first go at a Gears of War game, and I thought they did a nice job because I thought they paid respect to the main characters of the original trilogy and kind of took that foundation of the original trilogy and built upon it in a meaningful way and an interesting way, I'd say. I liked the story. I liked the new characters that they introduced. And I like, and this isn't a spoiler, but kind of seeing some of the older characters, how they brought them back. And some of the gameplay moments in that game are really, really fun. Like I keep thinking about this motorcycle sequence, which I think you're like racing through some storm, if I recall. And it's just great. It's genuinely great. And I remember playing this game being like, this is awesome. Like this is a really, really good game. And seeing what Gears of War 4 in the Coalition brought to it compared that with 343 in like Halo 4 and Halo 5. Yeah, Halo's not sitting so well. But Gears of War 4, I thought they did a really, really awesome job. And that's why it's on this list, because again, I feel like it's overshadowed now with Gears 5. But I think Gears of War 4 is better, man. I really do. And that'll do it for this episode. I went on a little longer than I thought I would, probably because I rambled quite a bit on that pricing topic in video games, but hopefully made a good point, and it's an interesting topic of conversation. But let me know what you think down on the YouTube comments or right into the show. Hit me up on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast, or leave a comment over on Locals, the Gamecite Chronicles.locals.com. Appreciate your time, your kindness, your love, and your supports of the show. Hope you all have an awesome week ahead. And remember, new episode of the show every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And keep in mind, the next episode, we're going to start diving into all this crazy news that is already out there. And who knows, Xbox is taking over the world, PlayStation's garbage, and all hail Phil Spencer. I don't know. I'm just making shit up because I'm recording this ahead of time. So who knows what'll happen between now and when this episode goes live. But anyways, I'll talk to you all soon. Thank you again. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.